Dragon Ball Sparking Zero feels like the moment that a lot of us fans have been waiting for, but at the same time, it's made a lot of us quietly and not so quietly uneasy about the overall reception of the game. Now, on the surface, it looks like the triumphant return of the Budokai Tenkaichi lineage, massive characters, cinematic clashes, planet-shaking energy beams, and that unmistakable Dragon Ball sense of scale. But once the initial excitement settled, the conversation around Sparking Zero had shifted, not into outright disappointment, but into something more complicated. Because this isn't just about whether Sparking Zero is a good game, it's about what it represents for Dragon Ball games, for Bandai Namco, and for the future of a franchise that has lost its creator. And that context matters more now than ever. So let's start off on a positive note. Let's start with what Sparking Zero undeniably gets right. From a presentation standpoint, this game understands Dragon Ball. The camera work, the exaggerated movement, the way characters collide at absurd speeds, it feels closer to watching anime than most modern Dragon Ball titles have managed. There's a rawness here, an almost reckless embrace of scale that recalls why Budokai Tenkaichi stood out in the first place. The combat is fast, it's chaotic, and unapologetically dramatic. You're not pressing buttons, at least I hope you're not. You're reacting to momentum, positioning, and space in a way that few arena fighters manage to pull off. The sense of verticality alone already puts Sparking Zero in a different league compared to flatter, more restrained entries in the fighting game genre. Visually, the game also makes a strong case for itself. Character models feel expressive rather than stiff, attacks feel heavy rather than floaty, if that makes sense, and the spectacle, when it hits, it really hits. In moments like these, Sparking Zero feels like a love letter, but love letters can still be incomplete. One of the most common criticisms surrounding Sparking Zero right now is its stage variety, or rather the lack of it. For a game that emphasizes massive earth-shattering combat, the number of available fighting environments feels surprisingly limited. Well, actually not surprisingly, because Dragon Ball actually has a habit of not putting the utmost effort into their games since Budokai Tenkaichi 2 and 3, in my opinion. Dragon Ball is a universe overflowing with iconic locations, ruined cities, alien worlds, hellscapes, sacred realms. When you reduce that diversity, you also reduce how distinct each battle feels. It's not that the stages are bad, it's that they don't evolve the experience over time. And then there's the character roster, or more accurately, how it's structured. Sparking Zero boasts an impressive number of character slots, but a significant portion of those slots are variations of the same fighters. Multiple versions of Goku, Vegeta, and other core characters are expected. This is Dragon Ball, but when those variations begin to crowd out unique fighters, it starts to feel like quantity over substance. This is where comparisons to older titles become unavoidable. Now, unfortunately, I no longer have my Nintendo Wii, so I do not have access to gameplay of Budokai Tenkaichi 2 and 3, so you have to forgive me. Budokai 2 and 3 weren't just great Dragon Ball games, they were content-rich experiences that respected players' time. Budokai 3 in particular felt almost absurdly generous, a massive roster, meaningful transformations, branching story routes, world exploration, unlockables that felt earned, and mechanics like Dragon Universe that encouraged experimentation rather than repetition. Budokai 2 leaned into its board game style overworld, which, while divisive, gave the game identity. It wasn't afraid to be weird, so to speak. It wasn't afraid to try something structurally different. Between the two, that's actually my favorite. And most importantly, those games felt complete at launch. When fans compare Sparking Zero to Budokai 3, they aren't just nostalgic, they're remembering a time when Dragon Ball games felt like full meals, not foundations waiting to be expanded. Later Dragon Ball games each contributed something meaningful to the franchise, even if they weren't universally loved. Raging Blast 2, my all-time favorite Dragon Ball game, refined arena combat and offered one of the more interesting what-if story modes Dragon Ball has seen. It leaned into fan imagination rather than retelling the same beats again and again. Dragon Ball Z Kakarot did something entirely different. It slowed things down. It focused on immersion, exploration, and letting players live in the Dragon Ball world rather than just fight in it. Its RPG structure made the Dragon Ball saga feel personal again, and its respect for the source material was clear throughout the entire game. Ultimate Tenkaichi, despite its controversial gameplay, understood spectacle. I put hundreds of hours into that game myself back when it first came out. The cinematic clashes, the visual scale, and the sense of power were unmatched at the time. Ideas Sparking Zero clearly draws from. It was something different. It's not critically acclaimed, but It's something that was unique, and that's something I think Sparking Zero lacks to a certain degree. And for anybody who isn't familiar, Ultimate Tenkaichi was the Dragon Ball Z game. I had it for PS3. It's where you created your own character. It had its own original story, and just the way that the fights, the mechanics of the fighting, it wasn't something that, it wasn't like Sparking Zero where it was like an open world, open map, and you're just fighting fast-paced combat. It slowed it down as well, and you would designate particular actions for your character to perform at a certain time. It was kind of like role playing. It was kind of like a role playing Dragon Ball Z game. Each of these games added a piece to the puzzle. Sparking Zero inherits all of that, but hasn't fully synthesized it yet. The most important thing to understand about Sparking Zero is that it feels like a platform, not a conclusion. More stages will likely come, more characters will almost certainly arrive, expanded modes, story variations, and refinements are expected, especially in today's live service adjacent gaming landscape, and also especially due to all the criticism that this game has received, and rightfully so, I think. And that's both exciting and concerning. Exciting because Sparking Zero has the bones of something truly special. Concerning because the expectation of future updates can excuse a lack of completeness now. The question becomes, is Sparking Zero being treated as a legacy title or as a product roadmap? Zooming out to a bird's eye view, Dragon Ball games are at a crossroads. The franchise is massive, global, and commercially powerful, but it's also entering a sensitive era following the passing of Toriyama Sensei. So far, there's been no visible sign of the brand being pushed in a direction he wouldn't have wanted. Dragon Ball still feels like Dragon Ball. The tone, themes, and spirit remain intact generally, I think. But the fear fans quietly hold isn't immediate corruption, it's gradual dilution. Too many releases, too much monetization, too much reliance on nostalgia without understanding why that nostalgia exists. Dragon Ball works because it balances simplicity with sincerity, power with heart, humor with consequence. If future games forget that, if they chase spectacle without substance, that's where contamination could begin. Dragon Ball Sparking Zero isn't a failure. Far from it, actually. It's a strong foundation, a visually stunning return to a beloved style, and a reminder of what Dragon Ball games can be when they embrace scale and freedom. But it also carries the weight of expectation, not just from Budokai 2 and 3, but from an entire legacy. The future of Sparking Zero will depend on whether Bandai Namco treats it as a celebration or a template, and the future of Dragon Ball games as a whole will depend on whether they remember what Toriyama's greatest creation wasn't just about power levels. It was about wonder. And that wonder is something no patch, no DLC, and no sequel can just manufacture. It has to be understood. I'm Harlem, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. If you want to see a Transcendent Kamehameha, stick around for a couple more seconds.
Stronger I am. You go down, damn you! Kamehameha!